to another episode of Speciality Sessions with me, your host, Natasha Klimchuk. Today's guest is someone who I know really well. I've been fortunate to call him a boss, a mentor, and more recently, a friend, James Clews, Managing Director of Technikraft. Welcome to the podcast, James.
Thanks, Tash.
I thought I'd give you a nice intro, considering we've known each other for quite a long time.
Yeah, appreciate it.
So for anyone that doesn't know you and doesn't know Technikraft, would you mind telling everyone who's listening and watching who you are and what you do?
For sure. So, James Clews. I am an experienced person working in the chemicals industry. I've been doing it for about 12 years now, and I run a business called Technikraft. Technikraft formulate and manufacture chemical products for consumer brands and also B2B brands, specialising in things like automotive car care, cycling, and household cleaning.
You and I have known each other, well, out of those 12 years, I think 10 almost now, which is, it's crazy, isn't it, to look back and think actually how early you were in your journey. We worked together at a company, Stevenson's, a soap-based manufacturer, and you were the person to me that knew everything. And I bet you look back at that time and go, actually, I probably didn't know as much as maybe what I thought you did.
Yeah.
Stevenson's being, a family-owned business, and now Technikraft, one with private equity backing. How's that transition been for you? Because you were at Stevenson's for a long time.
I was, yeah. I was there for 10 years. Had an amazing time, learnt loads, really, really enjoyed it. And yeah, you're right, it was a family-owned business, so there was really, in a sense, there was one decision maker. And what that means is the agility that comes with working in an SME is really, really present when there's just somebody that you can ultimately go to and say, can we do this? Here's my proposal. And they go, yes, and there's nobody else to defer to. The transition working for a company that's now PE backed is there's a bit more process, there's a bit more rigor, but it's not unwieldy. It's just different. You just need to report in a different way. There's a bit more detail that's involved, but it's fundamentally it's still an SME. It's still got the flexibility of an SME, and actually that's why the PhD Industrial Holdings that own a majority of the business, they like that. That's their type of business. So they don't want it to become overly too process driven or reporting for reporting's sake. They're really not into that. They kind of want it. They buy these businesses because they're good, and they don't want to take the good out of them by putting some big framework over them. But there's certain things you've got to do.
Yeah, of course. As any business grows, naturally you need more process, more structures to be able to manage that to facilitate more growth. You've moved into this PE environment now, and I think a lot of people that I speak to, and especially to be direct candidates, and if I'm working with a company that's private equity backed, a few people are kind of, would I go as far as say reluctant? Maybe, but certainly nervous about working for a company that's private equity owned. And I think because, like you say, the reporting structure is different, especially if they've come from, another privately owned SME environment. But what are the positives of working with a private equity backed company, especially in the SME space?
Yes, I mean, I had no experience of what PE really meant before I joined Technikraft, and
Were you
I think it's
nervous
also
about
worth.
that?
Yeah, I was, because I'd heard what little I'd heard was there's going to be loads of pressure. There's going to be really, really tight time frames for achieving certain things, and that wasn't my experience. There is a requirement to perform. There is a need for high performance, of course. And I'm sure my experience of PE will not be the same as everybody's experience of PE, because the model that I'm working in here is slightly different. It's more of a holding company, and there isn't a fixed time frame that, there isn't a cycle, really.
Okay.
But the really good stuff is we're part of a little network, because I'm one of several businesses in PhD Industrial Holdings. So the bit that was really attractive for me when I was interviewing was they said, you're going to come in, if you're successful, you'll come in, but there's other people doing what you do in these other businesses around the group. So there's a network of people you can talk to, and you'll bring in new ideas in, and you'll be able to contribute that to other people, but you'll be trying to fix something, and somebody else has already been there and done it. So you can reach out to them, talk to them about it, and really what the guys that sit on our board, that also sit on the boards of the other businesses in the group, they'll feedback in various sessions and say, that's really interesting, that's a challenge for you. You should speak to Brent at AMC.
Yeah.
You should speak to Tim at BIL Group. He did that a year ago, and this is what he learned. But don't let us repeat it. You go ask him. You go talk to him about it. You'll get more value. So that was really helpful. And ultimately, you're working with and for a group of people that have done lots of stuff. They've seen lots of businesses. The guys I work with, they came through. They were in very transactional roles for many, many years. They were buying and selling businesses, representing owners, representing on the sell side and the buy side. So they've seen loads and loads of stuff, and they have this really this line that they like to say, which is, we're just accountants. But they're just accountants that have spent 30 years looking at businesses in great detail and actually understand loads about it. So you're sort of walking into an environment with lots of experience that, it's really clear where the expertise sits. So they're looking for me to have a commercial view, and they've got a financial view, and between the two of us, we can figure it out and push it forward.
Yeah, and I think this is your first managing director position, so the book lies with you and making those decisions. I think having that network, taking that first step, I mean, I'm making an assumption here, is invaluable, especially not just from a practical point of view, but also from an emotional point of view as well, and a support network. I think if you're making difficult decisions, like you say, the book is lying with you, it's good to have a sounding board.
It definitely is. And, I've always, as I've progressed in my career, I've tried to be really open with whoever it is I'm talking to about that next step,
Sure.
about what I can do, what I haven't done before. And so being really clear about where my blind spots might be, what support I might need. So if I sort of rewind, I remember first being asked by my then boss at Stevenson, Jamie Bentley, being asked about taking over as sales and marketing director, rather. And the conversation I had with him was, I said, this is really exciting, but, I've not done anything like that before. I've not led a team that large. I've not had that responsibility. And so we had a really open conversation where I said, I'm really up for this, but I'd like it to be something that we both go into eyes wide open. And here are the things that I'm conscious about and want to make sure I can deliver on, but I'm going to need your support to do it.
Sure.
And it was very much the conversation I had with the guys that I report to in our sort of parent company, Phil and Craig. When it came to becoming MD, I joined the business as commercial director. And when we were having a conversation about MD, I was very clear. I said, I've not done this, I've not done that, but here are the things that you've seen me do over the 6 months I've been here. I know what I can do, and I know what I'm going to need support on. And it was, again, that very open conversation where everyone's on the same page. No one's over-promising. Everyone's saying, this is where we are. This is where we want to get to, but we're going to need to take some steps together. And I've just found, they're two quite big conversations in my career, but I found at every stage, if you have really be realistic, be open, and be vulnerable, because actually people really appreciate it. If you just talk, if you're the one that says, here's what I don't know, people really appreciate that. If you spend you can talk about what you do know all the time, but if you let that bit of vulnerability come in around your blind spots or your places you want to develop, well, then people start to contribute to it and start to go, great, okay, let's talk about that then. How can we help bridge that gap? What support do you need? Where do we need to look? So I've always found that I think that's a key bit of advice I give anybody is let yourself be a bit vulnerable, show your cards, because if you put that trust in people, they'll put it back in you.
Totally agree with you. And also, like you say, it's the trust piece. And if you have got the blind spots, I think the best leaders that I've observed, either during my time in recruitment as I've been speaking and interviewing people, or even my time working in industry, has always been the people that bring in the talent or bring in the people that bridge the gaps. So because you can't be the font of all knowledge, like you say, you just can't. And I think leading people in that way is positive and it's constructive. And leading people in different environments is different and has different challenges. How have you altered your leadership style working now within private equity versus in a family-owned company, or has it differed?
That's a good question. It's hard to say because your leadership style develops throughout your career.
Of course it
So
does.
it's hard to know what's time and what's environment, and what's exposure to stuff.
Mm.
I don't think it's fundamentally changed, but I have been investing in myself and trying to be more conscious around the more senior you get, the easier it is for people to think that you have better quality answers than them.
Yeah.
And that's something I've really, really got to be aware of, because I don't have better quality answers than everybody else necessarily. You
Mm.
know, me and another colleague in the business dealing with a situation, I might not be any more qualified to make that decision or to contribute to that decision just because my title's MD. That means I've got certain responsibilities, but it doesn't mean I know all the answers. And I have to be really careful to check myself and not and try not to, because I don't get this right all the time, but try not to lead with my opinions in situations, and try to give enough airtime for others, because seniority can be something that you're not aware of, but other people definitely are.
Yeah.
And and somebody said
Mm.
something to me the other day about well, when you ask, I know it's serious, and I thought, oh, okay, I need to really be careful with that, because it
Yeah.
might be serious, but it might not be. It might just be a flippant question that I've thrown out there, but I need to be conscious of the weight that might come with it, because of the role that I've got in the business. So I
Mm.
think that's something, yeah, that can be a blind spot. That can be something that creeps up on you because you're just getting on with your job, and you're like, okay, now my job's this, fantastic, right? I'll do that. But yeah, that can definitely be a blind spot.
Do you think that the honesty of feedback has altered since you've moved into managing director role? Because I think when you're working on a peer-to-peer level, um, you can be quite straight and direct with people. But something that I've spoken to in, CEOs and MDs in various size businesses, a theme that I've seen is the honesty of the feedback alters because maybe people are more reluctant to tell you what they actually think. Have you noticed that? How do you create an environment where people can professionally, voice reservations and concerns? Because there's a big difference between somebody just being disgruntled and having a genuine
There
worry or
is.
concern to stop you, jumping off a cliff, for want of a better term.
Yeah, it's tough.
Mm.
Is the short answer. It's really tough
Mm.
because something I find is, talk about vulnerability. I second guess whether I'm doing the right thing sometimes, or whether someone's said that's a good idea because of that point I made earlier around is it deference rather than actually it's a quality idea.
Mm.
And so it's I'm sure other leaders would relate to it being something that you do think about. Am I getting the feedback that I need
Mm.
to develop, to make good decisions, to help other people make good decisions? The main ways I try to manage it is I try to make sure that my feedback is candid enough and honest enough that somebody can reciprocate it.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to create environments where we can do it, be it one-to-ones with team members, where I just, try and get them to tell me how things are going.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that, I always want to be better at. As well, I just try to be as human as possible. I try to just be part of the team. And so
Mm.
I think if you can be as part of the team as much as possible, you've got a better chance of people being straight with you about their view on you or something that's going on.
Mm.
But it's definitely a dilemma, and I don't think there's a silver bullet that sorts that. I
No.
think it is something you've just got to keep balancing.
Yeah. And I think as well, when you are working for an SME, naturally there's less people. So that those messages are easier to be transferred than say, from a corporate that's turning over 20 billion, where, the senior leadership is far removed from, say, the shop floor, because naturally they are just by, number of people. And I think something that you and I have spoken about quite a lot in the past is you're really passionate about working in SME environments. And the fact that your career trajectory is not, it is different, but there's a really exciting career trajectory that you can have in an SME versus a large corporate. If you were going to pitch an SME role to somebody from a blue chip background, what would your 30-second pitch be?
Well, it's a really good question because my wife works in a blue chip environment. So periodically I pitch her on it.
Excellent. So I'm expecting a smooth
So,
one, well rehearsed.
well, no, sadly I never get it. It's never very good. So there isn't a right career path. There are multiple good career paths, and there isn't a right and a wrong choice. So the choices that I've made have led me into the SME world. And the stuff that I really like about it is the flexibility and the ability to make things happen. Now, you can make them happen because you have generally small groups of people around you, small structures, certainly short communication lines. So you can get things moving and you can change direction really quickly if you want to.
Sure.
Now, in blue chips, that environment can be created too. There are ways to do that, and often you've got bigger budgets in blue chips. So actually, when you do, if you can have that agility, you can make really big impacts. But yeah, I find it. I sometimes say, you can get your arms around it in an SME. You can, if you want to go and fix something or explore something, there won't be many steps before you've got there. So, be it wanting an all hands meeting with your entire team. Yeah, we've got remote working and stuff, but it isn't hard to get everybody on a call. You can just sort it. It isn't hard to walk around your whole factory and see every corner of it in half an hour.
Sure.
That gets a little bit less easy when you become multi-site, but it's all doable. So I think that there is the sort of that size, but with that also comes the ability. This isn't 30 seconds. So you've got that kind of that size that helps you be, to move and to be agile. But that doesn't mean that you can't build big, interesting, exciting things. And it doesn't mean you can't work with businesses that are blue chip. So I've got experience of working with some really big personal care blue chip companies, and it was super interesting seeing the way that some of them work. I remember Crisis Management is a great one. I used to work with a big company that in the sort of shaving space, and there was an out of stock of a raw material. The way that they created useful pressure to solve that problem was a masterclass. And I took loads away from that. And it's just a process that I'd not seen before. We'd never done anything like it in our company in terms of creating that sort of pressure. But it was one of those scenarios where you watched them and you thought, you've been trained to do this. This is not innate. You don't just happen to be somebody who's really good at this. You've been trained to be really good at this, and you've got a playbook on how to deal with potential out of stock scenarios. So there's loads to learn from blue chips, and just because you work in an SME doesn't mean, one, you can't experience them, and two, that they're not also a good option for sure. It's just different.
What do you think the misconceptions are of working for an SME organisation?
I think there's probably lack of conceptions rather than misconceptions. I don't know if that's even grammatically correct, but it's something we spoke about briefly preparing for the call, was I don't think people talk enough about what it even means to work in an SME. That was never something that I recall being discussed on careers days or at school or at university. And I think there's a real gap there, because an SME can mean a single person working in a business with a couple of occasional staff, turning over 150 grand. That's probably actually out of scope for SME, isn't it? But you know what I mean? It can be small.
Yeah.
Or it can be, 250 people in a business turning over tens of millions of pounds with multiple sites, with loads and loads of global reach. So it isn't one thing. It's just an arbitrary categorization of a part of the market that sort of doesn't fit with being big and corporate. So I think that it's the lack of conversation around it probably when people are thinking about careers. And because it's so diverse, what is a career path in an SME? I think that's hard to define. Whereas everybody that I know that went to work for particularly the grad scheme providers like, the big four, like Deloitte and things like that, or, you go and work for somebody like Google or some other big organization, really clear career paths, loads of options, quite helpfully formulaic and structured. That isn't necessarily how it works in SMEs. Although lots of SMEs are increasingly trying to create their own versions of that to entice talent, which I think is really good. But it's not always, the misconception is probably I can't progress, I won't have the right training and support, and that if I want that, I need to go, into a bigger organisation. And sometimes that's true. Sometimes that is a better way to get certain training qualifications. When I speak to our guys in the private equity company that I work with, they're a big fan of people going through the big four, for example, before ending up working in a financial role in one of their businesses, because they think particularly an audit background, they think that the sort of diligence that comes from that is incredibly valuable, and the exposure. Seeing, if you're working audit and you see loads and loads of businesses, and you're working for Deloitte or PwC, and then you drop out into the world of SMEs, you've got loads of, you bring loads of experience with you. So I don't think they're sort of two discrete career paths either. They can intermingle.
Yeah, it's an interesting trajectory, isn't it? Because your trajectory into the chemical space wasn't linear either. I mean, that wasn't necessarily what you planned. Um, remind me, what was your degree was science based though, right? And then, like, what happened there?
Yeah. So my degree was in neuroscience. So it's
Mm,
basically a biological science focusing on the central nervous system, which I
yeah.
think it was interesting. I went to university because I wanted to learn. I wanted to do something interesting, and I didn't know much beyond that. So I did that, and then I ended up working for a small manufacturing business that I'd worked for in my gap year, and also in the summer holidays. It was my friend's parents' business, and I was working there when I got contacted by a recruiter
Mm,
who said there's a role, they would like somebody with some scientific background who's got some commercial experience, and they're looking for somebody to come and work with them. So that was me. I had that science background. I had that commercial experience. I've been working a little bit of export sales, bit of UK sales, and so I went to visit this soap company. Which, when I was working for a business that was turning over 600 grand, this was like a blue
massive.
chip to me.
Yeah,
This was just
yeah,
huge. I was like, oh my God, look at it. There's
yeah.
30 cars in the car park. There's all these massive vessels and storage tanks in the yard. So this felt like a moving from something very different, even though these were both SMEs.
Mm,
And so yeah. So and what transpired was I'd done enough chemistry in my degree that I could get to grips with the products quite quickly. I could talk with the technical team. I
mm.
could get to grips with it, which is really what the business wanted, somebody that could learn quite quickly because they just had a certain foundation.
Look back at that time. I can relate to that. I mean, as you know, my background was nursing. I was working for the social care sector, and my first day at Stevenson's felt like a million miles away from what I was used to. And then, you look at your time transitioning out of Stevenson's into Technikraft. I mean, you were planning on taking a year out. That didn't really work out for you.
It didn't really work out, but it did work out. But yeah, it
Yeah.
was it was not as I planned. So I'd got after 10 years, I decided, and having recently got married,
Mm,
I sort of had a conversation with Kathy, my wife, and agreed that I was ready for a break. So I'd had a mega time in my career, really enjoyed it. I'd learned so much. I'd worked with some really fantastic people, and I got to the stage where I was probably ready for something else, but I didn't know what. So I had these grand plans. I was going to take a year out. I was going to go cycling. I was going to go skiing. Kathy and I were going to spend loads of time together. And then maybe I was going to find a job in Germany because Kathy's German, and maybe we'd go back there, or Switzerland where her family's from, or maybe even London where we've both got lots of family.
mhm.
And so it was the end of 2022. These were the plans I was creating. And just before I finished the job I was doing, I got contacted by a headhunter who said, there's a company, they're a contract manufacturer, they're looking for an experienced commercial director that might be interested in progressing to MD one day. They don't have a real clear commercial plan, but they're looking to help somebody to help build one. And they sort of told me all about it. And I was like, oh no. Oh, that sounds a bit interesting. I thought, oh, that's really not good timing. But I thought, you've got to start somewhere
Sure.
in terms of, you're thinking about a career and stuff. So I thought, well, I'll get involved in the process because it sounds interesting. And also, even if I'm not successful, it can be useful experience that will help me formulate what do I actually want to do. And I had all sorts of ideas. I thought maybe I'd go move into a completely different sector. You know, I thought automotive was interesting. I thought sustainable energy was interesting. So I didn't really know, but I was going to take a year to think about it. So I'm sort of minus 1 day into that year because it's actually before I've even finished when I start this conversation. And then I find out a bit more, and I find out that they work in automotive and cycling. And I thought, oh no, I really like that as well. And then it got worse because then I met the people involved, and they were really cool, and I could see a really good fit. And so very rapidly, this sort of big vision of, we're going to move somewhere new, we're going to do a totally different career, and all this sort of started to turn into something else. And I remember speaking to Kathy saying, there's good news and there's less good news. So the good news is I think I've found a really, really exciting job. The bad news is it's in East Yorkshire rather than in Germany, London or Switzerland. And the bad news is they'd like somebody to start fairly soon. so it was it felt like a bit of a risk because I'd not really had that proper pause that I expected to have. But I had had enough of a pause because I was probably a month into my break. So it was probably late January, maybe even early February before I actually got an offer. And we discussed that I would like to keep a bit of theoretical notice period. So actually I didn't start work until April. So I did have a really good chunk of time doing the things that I described, making long meals for me and Kathy, mountain biking all over Europe, skiing in the snowy part of that time off. So I did get to do all that really good stuff. But yeah, a year off became 3 months off. And actually with a really clear, fairly halfway through that time, I knew what I was going to be doing at the end of it. So it felt a bit of a risk because I knew I wouldn't get the chance to have a big chunk of time off again for a while. And I'd not had a break between university and school or after university and starting work. Not that I'm owed one, but I just hadn't had those experiences.
Sure.
So it was, but it felt right. It was a really good fit. The people were a good fit. The business was a good fit. I could see it being really exciting and fulfilling. So yeah, I decided to go for it. And, I haven't regretted it for a moment since.
No, and I think something you've kind of alluded to there and something we've spoken about is that importance of just being all in. The timing's not quite right. The location's not necessarily what I wanted. Maybe I was looking for sunnier climes, even if it was just down the M1. But that importance of being all in and being committed and actually making the decision that, yes, okay, all of these things that I thought I wanted isn't presenting itself here, but this is an opportunity that, is really engaging. What does being all in mean in practice for you personally? Because we talk about it a lot, don't we? I'm all in, I'm all into something. What does that really mean?
It's a bit of advice I give to lots of people I work with. And I feel that I've been effective in my career by being all in. And for me, all in means focus. So if I'm doing it, that's what I'm doing. So if I think early on in my career, with Stevenson particularly, my job was initially to be an account manager, to go out and visit customers and sell. So that's what I did. I was out doing 50 flights a year, visiting customers, spending a week in Poland, then a week in Australia, then a week in Japan, with maybe a week at home in between. And by just committing to it and, and it was no hardship. It was really, really fun as well. That helps. Yeah. But I wasn't thinking, I'm all in, but I'm also, I wonder what my next move might be though, or I wonder where this is going to take me. And this is just personal preference.
Sure.
My preference has been not to think too many moves ahead,
Mm.
but to actually really maximize on the thing you're doing now, because this wasn't strategic. It was just the way I enjoyed to work.
Mm.
But then what seemed to happen is opportunities presented themselves.
Mm.
There is that saying, you make your own luck. So I don't think it was just by happen chance, but
No.
I was all in, really committed, making things happen. And then people start to say, okay, you seem to be effective. Would you also be interested in this? Or you start to look at something else in your environment and go, well, I could also contribute to that. But I was never looking outwards. I was never one for always benchmarking and looking around at other companies and all this. And that's fine if people want to do that. And I think that's also a good strategy. But for me, I was just completely committed, not one eye on the other side of the fence. And then cool stuff happened. And it's the same where I am now. All in is I'm not thinking about the next career move. I'm thinking about the next move for the business, because my job right now is for this business.
Mm.
And a consequence of that will be my career will progress and I will do other things. But
Great.
that's a byproduct. The job is the thing that I need to
Mm.
focus on. And it will pull me forward.
Mm.
But I have seen examples of people maybe getting too focused on the formula. Right, I'm going to do this, then this, then this, and then that means I can do that. And right, okay, and then maybe I'll be happy as well. By the way, P.S. And really pegging future achievement or milestones on that. And I think it does tie in. Like everybody in management, I've read a couple of books, right, and so I like to regurgitate little bits from them.
Mm.
But a great one I read was called The Happiness Advantage, which was recommended to me by another leader. And it talks about not pegging your happiness on future things, being
Mm.
happy now. And I think that's what all in is. It's actually saying, I am happy. I am going to enjoy this. And then some good stuff will happen too. But not saying, I'm doing this because I have to. If I do it, then something will happen and that thing will make me happy. So I sort of found a book that I guess aligned with my values. I'm not saying it changed how I thought, but it really framed what I felt like I'd been doing, and gave me a useful way to describe it to other people.
Like that. And what a nice sentiment to end the episode on. I'm asking all of the guests that are on season 1 the same question, so you're not getting out of it either. If you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would that advice be?
Trust your gut. You'll make if you don't, you'll make some decisions really slowly, but you'll still make them. So get in tune with it. Your gut comes from experience, so you can't necessarily do it day one. But there gets to a point in your life and your career where actually you knew what the right answer was. You'd seen enough to know that. Trust it. Make the decisions quicker, because you'll one day look and go, if I'd just done that 6 months earlier, if I'd just done that 3 months earlier, if I'd just done that 20 minutes earlier. So I think it's okay to trust your gut and know that your gut's actually something that's calibrated based on experience. It's not just a feeling from nothing.
I think that's something that I've learned over the years, certainly, especially in my field. And it takes a while to get there, and it takes a while to fine tune and understand what is a gut emotional reaction, what is a gut experience response. But
Yeah.
I think great advice for maybe 17-year-old James just about to think about going to university. So thanks so much for joining me today. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope you have as well.
Yeah, me too.